My name is Matt Kramer, and I lead the Wildflower Foundation. We are creating a national network of one-room shopfront Montessori schools. The core of the idea of Wildflower is to take schools that cast off sort of all of the strange baggage we've brought into education and get down to its essential ideas. To think about, like, what would you have if we didn't get into the world of factories as schools, if we hadn't got into the idea of trying to get all the kids in the same age to be moving through schools at the same time, if we hadn't got into the idea of everyone should learn the same set of things, like, what would school be like in an unencumbered environment? And I think there's a lot of things we can turn to for that insight, right? We can turn to what did schools look like 150 years ago before the institutional approach set in? We had one-room schools across the country where, a teacher and 20 kids would be in a room and it was integrated into a community. And we know from looking at schools now that these tiny little schools, teachers are happier and kids are happier and parents are less turned off. Achievement gaps are dramatically reduced in schools that are tiny. Another aspect of, like, what would a natural school environment look like, we can turn back to Maria Montessori and her observational educational anthropology from 100 years ago, where the question she asked is, what do kids do when you create an environment in which their natural expressions of who they are and their natural curiosity and peacefulness and goodness can sort of come into contact with the world? What do? And it turns out what they do is they learn all the time. And Montessori environments are sort of designed to reflect that people in their natural state. And so that's the second aspect of Wildflower. The other aspects of it are intentionally diverse groups of folks drawn from neighborhoods by putting schools in transitional areas between neighborhoods, involving parents heavily in the school environment so that you don't create this sort of separation between the life of school and the life of home, but more thinking about education as something that happens in our lives, as John Dewey said, thinking about education as life instead of education as preparation for life. I think Montessori is a movement. I think, like, in every sense, there are now 22,000 Montessori schools around the world. So over the course of 100 years, we have gone from, Maria by herself training two other people to more than 100,000 Montessori teachers. Wildflower is not a movement. Wildflower is a community within the movement, and it is a mechanism by which we can empower teachers to create Montessori schools with all these other things that we think are exciting sort of pieces of a fully articulated Montessori vision. I think one of Wildflower's contributions is, I feel like over the last 10 years or so, we've learned about how hard it is to grow new schools and to scale new schools. And at the same time, we've learned that it's much easier to create new things than it is to change old things. It's not to say that's the only thing we should be working on, but it is generally speaking easier. But the efforts we've gone through to grow new things have been really hard. They run into all sorts of challenges. They run into there's not enough buildings to put them in. And it takes an extraordinary leader to lead a very complicated 300 kid school. And we don't have enough of them. And we're making them as fast as we can, but it's really hard. And I think one of the contributions of Wildflower is the idea of designing the unit itself in such a way that organic processes can govern it, that it can actually replicate itself, that the scarce resource of buildings is actually not a scarce resource. Like, you design the organism so that it can feed off the thing that's actually available in the world of shop fronts. And the need for an extraordinary principle isn't the same thing if the school's only one room. It's just not as complicated. And so I feel like that's the contribution of Wildflower as a model in the educational system, as opposed to educational delivery itself. Is it's something that is designed to be able to continue to grow by itself without pushing the rock up a hill.